The Sacramento Kings are in an interesting position now that De'Aaron Fox has asked for a trade. And it's really interesting to see where this team will try to pivot. Now, there is some new information related to not only DeMar DeRozan and his future with the team, potentially anyway, but also a new trade target. So I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure you subscribe because 80% of viewers aren't subscribed, and you want to be joining that 20% that is. You won't regret it going forward on the channel. The like goal for today's video, if you see it below it, help us out. I'd appreciate it. It's 500. And let me know, do you think that the Kings should be targeting John Collins? All right. So we're going to go ahead and talk about that here. And here's a look at the article from Clutch Points. So a lot of noise has been made about Sacramento Kings this season. Aside from firing Mike Brown, all-star guard De'Aaron Fox is now the focus of conversations leading up to the NBA's trade deadline. However, on top of all the drama, the Kings are still exploring the trade market for ways to improve, leading them to serious talks with the Utah Jazz about big man John Collins, league sources tell Clutch Points. So I talked about this in a video previously. This was like a thing like a week and a half ago, where they were targeting John Collins, and I detailed what he could bring to this team. But that was when it seemed like De'Aaron was going to stick around because, again, there was that De'Aaron Fox stuff right around the time that Mike Brown got fired. Then they started winning and playing better, and that all kind of went away. And it's interesting to see that stuff kind of came back as well with De'Aaron as well. But regardless, it looks like they're still trying to compete, which I think is probably the best case because you've got to think about it from Sacramento's perspective. They had a 17, 18-year hiatus from even making the playoffs. So imagine trying to trade De'Aaron for young players and then just try to do another rebuild and sell that on your fan base and all that stuff, especially a fan base that has gotten super invested recently because the team's been okay. They've been making the playoffs. They got the whole light the beam thing going on, and Sacramento's been really enjoying having their team back. So that being said, imagine trying to sell that fan base on that. I don't think that will go over well. That's one piece of it. And then the second piece is when you look at their books scream stay competitive. Now, that doesn't mean they can't try to find a way to get off of some of these guys. Sabonis here, 40 million plus. DeMar, they just signed him. He's got another couple years at 24, 25 million. Malik Monk, again, got an extension here until 28. Murray, they got a couple more years on the books with him, and I'd imagine they'd want to keep him either way. He's still young enough. Some stuff going on with Devin Carter extension later on. So they've got, it's not like they're in some crazy dire situation where, trading Fox completely catapults this team down where they can't be competitive or anything like that. I think if you trade De'Aaron Fox, if you have to, because they don't necessarily have to trade him right now. This could go all the way until the next deadline. They don't have to trade him right here, right now. But if you were to trade him right here, right now, and you got back some competitive players, I think this team could still be competitive. I mean, you've got a core there that you would probably just shift to build around Sabonis, and I think you could be really good. So that being said, trying to target John Collins addresses one of their needs, kind of. So let's get back to that. All right, so the Kings have been browsing the trade market for front court help over the last several weeks. Collins, who the Jazz has made available, is an athletic front court option who has put together a very respectable season to this point. His athleticism and rebounding abilities are what make him a viable secondary option next to Fox, maybe, Sabonis, and DeRozan. So one of the things that the Kings absolutely need is more front court depth. They just don't have a lot of it. And then they have some guys, but they're undersized. If you were to try to play Jay Crowder at the 4 or super duper small ball with him at the 5, it's just not going to go over well. They've got some young guys that aren't really fully there yet, like Isaac Jones here, who's apparently on a two-way deal because I don't even see a salary number there. Len is the guy that you would typically turn to, 31-year-old 7-footer, NBA vet. He's just not been good. All their lineups with him in there have been bad. So what the Kings typically tend to do is they go to Lyles, and I actually do like Lyles as a glue guy. They typically go to Lyles as their small ball / backup 5. And he's done an admirable job, but the team just needs more front court depth. And so when I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, one thing that was pretty clear was that if the Kings were to try to make a trade for John Collins from Utah, then you would have to be putting together something I'm not sure if you could change it around a little bit, but the way it looked like, I mean, you kind of can't really change it around too much, because there's not a lot of salary here. I'm sure you could probably put together another package, but the most popular addition of a trade for him was Lyles and Herter. And Herter's not been good this season. And if he's not out there hitting his shots, he's almost not even playable. So a lot of their lineup data last time I checked a couple of weeks ago was just extremely bad with him. Maybe he's on an uptick recently, but on the season, he has not been great. So that's more or less what it looks like. And I think that you are addressing the need of adding a big. My only problem is you're getting rid of your main backup big. That's the only thing I don't really like about, doing that. But I do think that the team gets better making a trade for John Collins. And here's a look at the production from John just statistically this year. And I talked about in the other video as well, kind of the way that they use him. Sometimes they put him in these super big lineups where he's getting minutes at the small forward position, quote unquote, technically, right? Like he's not really there, but but they put him out there in some really weird, funky lineups with him and, Kessler or whoever else is out there. And they're doing this triple big thing. It's kind of weird, but he's been successful in it, to his credit. So 18 points, 8.5 rebounds. He's playing 29 minutes per game. So he's not playing 30 minutes per game plus, like 33, 34, 35. So if you were to try to get him, I do wonder if he's somebody, because for his career, he typically plays 30 minutes. He averages 29. Like, I wonder if he's a player where if you gave him an increased amount of minutes, increased usage, if he would actually scale better or not, because this production is pretty good on a 28, 9.8, 30 minute, basically, per night average. So he's giving you 53% from the field on 12.5 attempts. On 3-point attempts per game, he's shooting 44%. So he typically has done that for his career. He's a career 3 attempt per game, we'll say, rounding up a little bit, but 36% free 3-point shooter. That's good enough to get it done as a big. But I do wonder if you were to, because he kind of goes up and down a little bit, as you would imagine. I do wonder if you were to give him 5 attempts, right? 5 attempts, 6 attempts. What would that look like? Would he still be 36 plus? Because right now he's at 45% from 3 on 3.3 attempts. That's insane. So in maybe a more high octane offense, maybe he would take more of those, but for his career, he doesn't really. But I would like to see if the shooting is truly real. And that's not a knock on him. It's a commentary on all the guys that kind of look like this. For example, for the Lakers, I cover them a lot. Rui Hachimura takes about 3 per game. He's been over 40% this year and last year. I kind of wonder, because when you look at his earlier careers, he was shooting like 20 something, I believe. I kind of wonder if the shooting's truly, truly real. But nonetheless, adding a 45% 3-point shooter to your lineup is awesome. 87% from the line. So great production from him. And I do think that he would, again, address a need that they have by giving them more front court depth and size. So let's get back to this. But again, stay tuned, because we do have a video on DeMar DeRozan kind of talking about the future with the Kings. So we're going to cover that as well. All right, so let's get back to it. Kings Jazz trade Collins talk. Even before Brown was fired by the Kings, the organization had been searching for high-level upgrades with the mindset of leveraging Kevin Huerter and Trey Lyles. Like I said earlier, these 2 players combined to make $24.8 million this season, creating a wide margin for the Kings to search the trade market with. Collins emerged as the top trade target in recent weeks, sources said. The Kings and Jazz have held extensive trade conversations about Collins and came up with a framework for a potential deal ahead of the deadline. Sacramento's interest in Collins has also been reported by NBA insider Mark Stein. Along with packaging Huerter and Lyles, a protected first-round pick and a second-round pick would have been going to the Jazz in this framework, sources said. Okay, so protected first, protected second. Or a second, protected first and a regular second-round pick. Utah had been seeking a first-round pick for Collins and was willing to accept such from Sacramento with little protection on it. All that was needed for a formal agreement from both sides, but ultimately conversations were put on hold in the final steps of negotiating. So it sounds like they got super close to this deal being done. I wonder if this was paused because the Jimmy Butler stuff that's kind of freezing the market as a whole. It's unknown at this time if the 2 teams will once again revisit talks on Collins ahead of Thursday's deadline. Well, maybe it's the Jimmy thing, but is this just the Kings thing? Like, is this just all the Kings drama over the last few weeks with like the Mike Brown stuff, then the De'Aaron stuff that came from that, and then now more De'Aaron stuff? Is that what this is? Because I'm not really sure exactly whether or not that's the problem here. Now, I do want to pull up John Collins' salary. That's where that S came from. I don't believe he's got a long-term deal. Yeah, he's only got 1 more year on the books here. So, and this year's already halfway done. So there's not a lot left on him in terms of this contract. So that's an interesting acquisition for them because that turns into it expiring next year. So if they wanted to reposition themselves with his contract, that's a pretty big expiring. It's kind of unfortunate because John is always on the trade block, it seems. In a total of 28 games a season, Collins is averaging that production in the fourth year of a $125 million 5-year contract with a player option next year. Due to the impact he can make offensively right away in Sacramento, not tying up the organization's long-term finances, Collins would make a lot of sense for the Kings to have in their front court, I guess this means to say. All right. So more or less, it seems like this is kind of on pause. It doesn't really specify why or how, or if this will resume. It's unsure if it'll resume. That was something I was not aware of, but just nice to talk about it again, as this is something that has been heavily talked about in the past. All right, so I wanted to kind of cover this here now, where we're covering the DeMar DeRozan thing on his future with De'Aaron Fox, or the Kings, if Fox is traded. So let's go ahead and do this here now. All right, and here we go.
I want to ask you a real question, a tough question. You chose Sacramento this offseason over the likes of a lot of different teams. If Fox is traded, do you reconsider your future with the organization, or what would you like to see happen for it to be a positive for you to remain there as well?
Yeah, it's tough because, looking at the landscape before I came here, the guys I talked to was Fox, Domas, and Malik. Those are the core guys that, made it easy for me to make my decision to play here, and a key player, juggernaut and Fox, not knowing the future of that, it does make it tougher. I don't have much time left. I'm not trying to play another 5 years, try to maximize the opportunity we have now to play with a great team. You never know when dominoes fall the wrong way, when it comes to organization, it makes it tough, so it's something that, we just got to weigh out and see. And, for the meantime, make the most out of it, so we'll see how it pan out.
All right. So he basically said he's not really sure because he was talking to those guys. They were the guys that kind of recruited him there. So it's unfortunate that De'Aaron wants out. And basically, you guys heard him. He's saying he doesn't know where this goes at that point. And he said he doesn't have much time. So he wanted to really maximize this window where he could play. He's not going to play another 5 years. But, when you look at him on the books here, for one, Sacramento was always going to be a decent team, right? Adding him, I thought they were always going to be a decent team with or without him personally, because that's what they've been the last couple of years. They've had some really fun, high octane offensive teams the last couple of years. I thought they were always going to be a decent team. But I also felt like DeMar, I don't know if this is completely accurate. I'd have to go back and look at the offseason, but I felt like he took more or less just the money because he got a pretty big contract here, because there would have been better teams he could have gone to for like an MLE or something like that to truly try to win right now. I don't think that was ever really going to happen here. Like, they were not going to push that deep into the West and ultimately win it all. So I feel like maybe he's okay with that, because that would have been like a $10 million pay cut for just this year. So I can understand why you would want to do that if you're DeMar, for the record, not really criticizing that. But I felt like he wasn't really invested on trying to win a championship because he wouldn't have chose the Kings, basically, is what I'm saying. So he doesn't really specifically mention a championship, though, to be fair. He says just be competitive with the team that they have, which could be one thing. Because not everybody, I mean, you kind of feel like you should, but not everybody is out there to try to win a championship, right? Players and organizations are all in different spots, and maybe sometimes that aligns and that's where they push for, but sometimes it doesn't, right? So anyway, moving on from that, I think that's pretty interesting because I don't know that they have to move DeMar, but the tricky thing with DeMar is I don't know if they wanted to move him. I don't know what you're getting back for DeMar. That's the tricky thing, because is he more reasonable on his deal than somebody like Jimmy Butler, obviously, who's going to be wanting 50 million plus? Sure, right? Like, he's going to be making literally half the money for the same statistical production, just same better, actually, because Jimmy's averaging less points. But that says nothing for the defensive side. That says nothing for the fact that there's other intangibles with Jimmy that you're not going to account for. But that's just more or less just on surface level stuff. So don't kill me for that. I don't think DeMar's a better player. But I don't know if he's going to be able to get the assets back that they would want. Like, I don't know what you could turn him into while still trying to remain competitive. To be honest, I don't know that he will want out, and I don't know that the Kings would trade him. I think they would probably try to write out this contract because he is appropriately aligned with the rest of their timeline here for the most part. You got one more year on the books for both Monk and Sabonis. But other than that, he's appropriately aligned, and he would be pretty old at that point. Coming off that, he's 35 or so now. He'd be about 38 in that area. So he'd be pretty old coming off that. Or even if you trade him next year, like, he would be the ultimate win now piece if a team were to try to trade for DeMar and acquire him even this year. He's like the ultimate, like, we've got to win right now type piece. And it's very similar to, and this is why I relate it to Jimmy. It's very similar because they're both really old. Right. And they're both going to want to. Jimmy's different because, again, he wants more money. Like, DeMar's got the money locked in, but they're going to want to be big parts of your team going forward. That's one of the things Jimmy talked about, is he wanted the opportunity to get more on ball reps, wanted to see more of the offense. And he felt like the team kind of has gone away from him. So that's one of the reasons why, among many reasons, why he's unhappy this season. So what do you guys think about DeMar? Do you think the Kings should blow it up, with the context that, like I said, it's kind of hard to sell your fan base on that? I don't. As somebody that lived locally in this area for a really long time, the fans won't be happy. I'm just going to be honest. They won't be happy. But at the end of the day, if they got to do it, they got to do it. I just kind of don't really, to be honest, I don't really care for ownership. I don't really know that I have faith in ownership to really put them in the right position to be successful coming off of this. It's going to be tricky. But what about the John Collins piece? Post down below what you guys are thinking. And if you guys want to see more content from us here on the channel, well, you know what to do. The video is right there. We'll see you over there.